Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel American English Academy. Today I want to tell you a powerful story about a German leader Adolf Hitler, who became one of the most infamous leaders in modern history. His story began with an ordinary childhood in Austria, but it eventually led to dictatorship, war, and mass murder. Today we will follow his life while practicing simple English through listening and speaking. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Hitler, worked as a government customs official, while his mother, Clara, cared deeply for her children. Hitler was interested in art during his younger years and dreamed of becoming an artist. However, his relationship with his strict father was often difficult. When Hitler was 18, his father had already died. A few years later, his beloved mother also died after suffering from cancer. These losses affected him deeply, and he moved to Vienna hoping to become an artist. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts twice, but he was rejected both times. Life in Vienna became extremely difficult for him. He struggled financially and sometimes lived in cheap accommodation. During these years, he developed extreme political and racial beliefs that later became central to his ideology. His experiences in Vienna did not create all his later beliefs by themselves, but they became part of the background of his political development. In 1913, Hitler moved from Austria to Munich, Germany. When the First World War began in 1914, he joined the German army as a soldier. He served as a dispatch runner and experienced the terrible conditions of trench warfare. He was wounded during the war and received military decorations for his service. Germany lost the First World War in 1918. The defeat deeply affected Hitler, who strongly rejected the peace settlement that followed. Germany faced political instability, economic problems, and widespread anger during the years after the war. Hitler became increasingly interested in politics and began speaking publicly about Germany's future. In 1919, Hitler joined a small political group called the German Workers' Party. He soon became one of its strongest speakers and organizers. The group later became known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. Hitler used powerful speeches to attract people who were angry about Germany's problems. His political message was built around nationalism, racism, anti-Semitism, and the rejection of democracy. He blamed Jewish people and other groups for problems that had much more complicated causes. He also promised to restore German power and overturn the post-war settlement. His speeches attracted growing numbers of supporters during a period of economic and political crisis. In 1923, Hitler and his supporters attempted to seize political power in Bavaria. The attempt failed, and Hitler was arrested and imprisoned. While in prison, he dictated much of a book called Mein Kampf, which presented his political ideas and racial theories. His writings revealed the dangerous ideology that would later influence Nazi Germany. After leaving prison, Hitler changed his strategy. Instead of immediately trying to overthrow the government, he worked to gain power through elections and political organization. The Great Depression began in 1929 and created enormous unemployment and economic suffering in Germany. The Nazi Party used this crisis to attract millions of desperate and frustrated voters. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He did not initially become an absolute dictator through one simple election. Instead, he and his allies gradually destroyed democratic institutions and removed political opposition. Within a short period, Germany had become a one-party dictatorship under Hitler's leadership. Hitler used propaganda to control public opinion. His government also controlled newspapers, radio, education, and many cultural institutions. Political opponents were arrested, imprisoned, and often brutally treated. The Nazi regime also created a system of racial persecution against Jewish people and other groups. The persecution of Jewish people became increasingly severe. Laws stripped Jewish Germans of many rights and excluded them from public life. Violence increased, especially during the nationwide attacks known as Kristallnacht in 1938. These actions were part of a wider Nazi campaign that eventually developed into systematic mass murder. Hitler also prepared Germany for another major war. He rebuilt the German military despite restrictions placed on Germany after World War I. Germany then expanded its territory through aggressive actions and military threats. In September 1939, German forces invaded Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II quickly became a massive international conflict. Germany conquered large areas of Europe during the early years of the war. Hitler's military decisions helped create enormous destruction across the continent. Millions of soldiers and civilians eventually died during the conflict. Behind the military expansion was an even darker crime. The Nazi regime organized the systematic persecution and murder of Jewish people across occupied Europe. This genocide became known as the Holocaust. Approximately 6 million Jews were murdered, along with millions of other victims of Nazi persecution and mass violence. The Holocaust involved ghettos, forced deportations, concentration camps, killing centers, mass shootings, starvation, and other forms of systematic persecution. Victims included Roma people, disabled people, Soviet prisoners of war, political opponents, and others targeted by the Nazi regime. The Holocaust remains one of the clearest examples of how racism, dictatorship, propaganda, and dehumanization can lead to catastrophic violence. Remembering these victims remains an important responsibility today. By 1943 and 1944, Germany's military situation had become increasingly desperate. Allied forces were advancing from the west, while the Soviet Union was pushing German forces back from the east. In June 1944, Allied troops landed in Normandy and began liberating Western Europe. Hitler's dream of controlling Europe was rapidly collapsing. As Germany moved toward defeat, Hitler became increasingly isolated. He remained inside his underground bunker in Berlin while Soviet forces approached the city. On April 30, 1945, Hitler died by suicide in the bunker. Germany surrendered shortly afterward, bringing the European war to an end. Hitler's life ended in destruction rather than victory. His policies had helped produce a devastating war and the Holocaust, leaving Europe deeply damaged. Millions of people had died because of the decisions made by Nazi Germany and its allies. Germany itself was defeated, occupied, and eventually divided after the war. The story of Adolf Hitler teaches several important lessons. Economic hardship, political anger, and social fear can create opportunities for dangerous leaders. Propaganda can manipulate people when they stop questioning what they hear. Most importantly, history shows what can happen when hatred, racism, dictatorship, and dehumanization are allowed to grow. Learning about Hitler is not about admiring him. It is about understanding how a democratic society can collapse and how ordinary people can become victims of dangerous political movements. His story also reminds us that words can influence millions when they are repeated through powerful propaganda. By studying this history carefully, we can recognize warning signs before similar tragedies happen again. And that is why history matters today. We study the past because its lessons can protect the future. We remember the victims because their lives should never be reduced to statistics. Most importantly, we learn English while learning about a difficult chapter of human history. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep learning, because every story can teach.